In America, when there's a financial collapse on Wall Street, the worst thing that happens is a few hundred people draining the scotch bottles at local downtown Manhattan establishments. In China, things are slightly different. Witness what happened today as around 200 people were arrested by the communist government for, you ready? Alleged online rumor mongering about the recent stock dump. As always, we are well above the fray with no need to monger. Bring in the experts. He is the veteran economist who did his turns on Wall Street and who now passes on his expertise here and via his book, The American Dream Under Fire, Steve Beaman. Joined by the prolific author, columnist, business economist at the University of Maryland and commentator, Peter Morici. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. I promise there will be no torture chambers that will be available here today. However, Steve, I have to get to you first on this one. This is the difference between China and the United States, but rumor mongering, come on, this is getting a little ridiculous now. The Chinese are trying to cover themselves as quickly as they can.
Well, clearly their government is out to blame anyone they can for the problems the government has created. When you have a market that's 61% owned by the government, that creates real economic problems, as we saw in the former Soviet Union. So the Chinese solution to this is to free up their markets and let the people go.
All right. Now, Peter, in your recent column, and I quote, China's turmoil, good news for U.S. economy and stocks. Wait a minute, Peter. Stop, please. People's heads are exploding all across America right now. We were told that this was disastrous.
No, it's not. For the last 10 years, we've been hearing about the Asian century and that the United States is all washed up, that the Chinese were going to be making the rules. I don't think the Chinese are going to make rules for anything but ping pong going forward. Moreover, China's run the string out, just like the Soviet Union and Japan, with a cheap currency and cheap labor to expand its economy. It is about to enter its lost decade, which means America will find itself again. We'll stop losing factory jobs. What's more, the Chinese will need what the Soviets did, the Japanese, the Koreans, and all the rest did. Good old-fashioned American technology. The Chinese communists are down to stealing only from each other now. There's no one else left to steal from.
All right. So, Steve, let me get it to you then. What I just said to Peter and the column that he wrote makes an awful lot of sense here. So then why are we consistently hearing from so-called experts telling us that this is disastrous, America, get ready for this monstrous black hole, and this is one of the worst things that could happen to us? Where's this all coming from?
Well, to Peter's point, we have an awful lot of the academic community who were the same ones saying it was Japan's future back in the 80s when they bought Rockefeller Plaza. I think Peter's largely right. This is a permanent flaw in socialism. It doesn't work with government controls. And the American economy leads the world in higher academics, higher education, technology development, patents. So we will guide the technology development. And just like the former Soviet Union, the Chinese will need to come to us to get it, as they have over the last 10 years.
Peter, let me go back to
another thing going on here. The media loves to quote Ivy League economists, and they're the most statist people of all. They live off of dead people's money, and they have a lot invested. You know, they like China the way it is, and they want America to be more like it. Obamacare and so forth. You know, if the Wall Street Journal would get out there and talk to people at state universities where the engineering colleges are and where things are being done and invented, they'd hear a very different story about America. But after all, at the Wall Street Journal, you either went to Harvard or Yale or some trade school that doesn't matter.
So, Peter, let me go back a couple of days earlier to another column you wrote where you said, and here's the title again, China's rigged markets will ultimately destabilize global capitalism. Well, after everything we've talked about here, isn't that sort of like a 180 here? I mean, if you would, please put that in context with what we're talking about here.
No, it's destabilizing right now. We're going through a fundamental readjustment. China is no longer going to lead growth. The Asian century, it lasted 15 years. Welcome to the second American century. It's out of instability and chaos that comes the new paradigm. America will lead. It's no longer going to be about investing, you know, in machines and so forth. Look at the GDP statistics. We're not investing anymore, according to those. That's nonsense. We are investing, but we're investing in ideas. Twitter, Facebook, droids, and all the rest. Those things are idea-driven. Look at the Ford Motor Company. No need for government assistance. What is Mark Field betting on? And that is turning the automobile into a nexus of technology services.
So, Steve, let me then get to what now we are all discussing here in America, and that is the Fed. I know, here we go. We have to get onto the Fed again, and here it is. The left is challenging, the right is challenging, the Fed still faces the decision. Do you believe we will see some sort of decision here this week?
Yes, and I think we're going to see a 25 basis point increase in rates, which is nominal, but it is a direction the Fed wants to go, and that's why the markets are a bit skittish. They're worrying if rates go up too fast, it could hurt stock prices. But I want to go back. You and I spoke with some folks last week, you may recall, and we talked about how the world was coming to an end and America had seen its best days. I think Peter's dead right. I think as we move into a new economy that's not just information-driven, but idea-driven, the United States in a free market capitalistic economy is going to dominate the world in ways we've never seen before.
So is it then, in your opinion, proper for the Fed to raise rates at this time? Again, here comes that thinking process one way or the other, good and bad.
Yeah, the rubber meets the road where they make that decision, and I do think they need to raise it. I think we need to put some value back in the capital base, and that will begin to do that.
30 seconds to you then, Peter. Right decision, and you also believe it'll be this week?
Yes, I think they will raise rates. They won't raise them as rapidly in the past, maybe a quarter point every other meeting. And there's no reason that America needs capital that costs zero. Lord knows what it does is distort decision-making. It enriches the Wall Street banks, which last I checked aren't in on the technology revolution at all. They're a millstone around America's neck. The Ivy League exploiting America. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, all the other parasites in Manhattan.
There they are, the parasites in Manhattan. I'm glad you called it, Peter, because I think you nailed it right on the head. Peter Morici, Steve Beaman, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. Now I'm going to turn it over to the audience here, because what Peter said here about Wall Street and Ivy League, Steve said it as well. Tell us what you think about what's happening. Is it the fault of those Ivy League economists here who don't quite have a full handle on what's going on? Come on. Do they know what you have to go through in your daily business and to pay your bills? Tell us about it. Email, Facebook, Twitter. We'll talk about it right here. Next, telling it like it is. Calling out the fraud who claims people died after Hurricane Katrina due to racism. It's coming up next right here on The Hard Line.